Hello, everyone, and I'm here today. I'm going to share with you the history of embalming and the effects that took place during the Civil War. The Civil War was a 4-year period that dramatically changed the funeral industry and really shaped our concept of modern embalming today. So we're going to discuss that 4-year period and the major events that took place during that time frame. All righty. Now, to understand that, we need to take a look at how embalming and how the funeral industry kind of changed during the Civil War. To understand that, we got to understand what happened prior to the Civil War. So, really, a big sea change in embalming came with this 4-year period between 1861 and 1865. Prior to the Civil War, most people grew up or lived in their own small communities. They lived in a relatively small range of space, and they didn't travel very far. Families would be typically tasked with caring for the body of someone who had passed. And since everybody was close by, they would generally arrange for a prompt funeral. So there really was no need for body preservation. Now, what happened during the Civil War to change all that? Well, first of all, young men were enlisting in the military, both the North and the South, in droves. They were sent off to war. Casualties during the Civil War were astronomically high for American soldiers. First of all, we were fighting ourselves, but second of all, the number of casualties and wounded because of the of not only the method of fighting styles, but the sanitary conditions was astronomical. Battle of Gettysburg, 3,155 Union soldiers died at that battle alone. And Antietam, and on one day of fighting, 2,000 Union soldiers died. That's just the Union soldiers. That does not include the Confederate numbers. Confederate numbers really are inaccurate because we don't have accurate records for that. And here's the shocking part. Nearly twice as many people died as a result of the poor health conditions in the camp and the poor health conditions in the hospitals than that from the actual wounds inflicted during combat. So that's a pretty shocking statement there. Often men who died in these battles would be buried in mass graves. And so suddenly there was a need for body preservation. There was a problem with sanitation and how to deal with it, and how do we deal with these massive amount of casualties. And families, of course, they were used to being able to take care of their departed right there at their own local homes, and now suddenly their loved ones were dying hundreds of miles away, and they couldn't care for them, and they couldn't grieve the way they used to. So that was creating a significant issue, okay? So that had to be addressed. And what changed during the Civil War? Let's take a quick look. So, what took place during the Civil War that really changed the attitude about embalming and really shaped where we're at today? First of all, the first big event was the death of Colonel Elmer E. Eellsworth. He was a personal friend of President Abraham Lincoln, and he was killed when he was sent out to go and retrieve a Confederate flag that had been posted in Alexandria, Virginia, which is right across the river from Washington, D.C. While he was on his way back, coming down from out of the hotel, he was shot and killed. Dr. Thomas More offered his services to the Eellsworth family. He was a man who practiced embalming, and he embalmed Colonel Ellsworth. Colonel Ellsworth then lay in state in the White House, and both the president and the first lady were really shocked at the way he was looked and how he was preserved. Then Colonel Ellsworth's body was taken by the Eellsworth family back to New York, and they had a procession for him there. And while they were there, thousands of people turned out for this procession, and the rally cry came about Ellsworth, his blood cries for vengeance. And so his death helped promote, actually, the war effort. And the fact that he was able to be embalmed and then be transported and preserved had a profound effect on the war effort for the Union. And so that was the beginnings of it. The next major event that happened, though, well, let's talk about Thomas More first. Thomas More is really known as the father of modern embalming, and he is the gentleman who embalmed Colonel Ellsworth. Now, he practiced medicine, and he was a coroner's physician. And in the 1850s, he perfected what we call today as the modern arterial embalming technique. It's generally acknowledged that he became, or he is known as, the father of embalming. As a result of his efforts there on Ellsworth's behalf and the recognition that he garnered from that, he became the Army Medical Corps commissioned officer, and he was commissioned to embalm corpses for dead Union officers so that they could be sent home. It is said that he embalmed over 4,000 bodies himself, but that's not all he did. He also created his own embalming fluids, which he mass-produced and then turned around and sold to other embalmers there at the battlefields. So what else happened? Well, the next major event was the fact that less than a year after Colonel Ellsworth passed, the son, Willie Lincoln, President Lincoln's son, passed away as a result of typhoid fever on February 20th, 1862. Now, the president requested that his son be embalmed, and the request went to a Henry P. Cattell, who was also an embalmer. And now, the experience of losing his son really devastated the president, but what really helped make a change here, or what really brought about recognition for this, was the fact that the president really could not let go of his son. And because he was embalmed and he was entombed there in Washington, D.C., while he was still president, the president, at least on 2 separate occasions, went and had the crypt open so he could actually look at his preserved bodies, or his preserved son's body, and see his face. So he was really dealing with the grief there. And the people in Washington, D.C., of course, knew about this, and it really better. This whole situation at the beginning of the war there brought about the birth of the embalming surgeons. They would gather at the battlefield, and they would gather the dead, as you saw in the video, especially high-ranking officers, because they could get more money for them. And then they would embalm the deceased and offer to return the body of their loved ones for a price. Okay? It became, as they said, a very cutthroat business. 2 major events, though, that really impacted how we work and see and work today is, one, in 1864, Timothy Dwight, who was the father of a Union officer, made a complaint against Dr. Richard Burr, a Washington embalmer. He claimed that Burr tried to extort money from him by holding on to his son's body for ransom. In other words, he refused to allow his son's body to be released to the family and returned to them, and demanded that they pay him for his services. As a result of this particular instance, the second thing was, as a result of this particular instance with Dr. Burr and several other embalmer surgeons, the War Department issued a General Order number 39 entitled Orders Concerning Embalmers on March of 1865, which essentially said that no one, they actually kicked all the embalmers off the battlefield is what they did, and essentially said no one can come and do this. No one can come and embalm our soldiers unless they have a license by the Provost Marshal. And so it really was, even though it took place only a year before the end of the battles, it really didn't have a profound effect during the war. But what it did was, it was really the first attempt to legally define professional requirements for undertakers. And so these are the effects and the major effects of the Civil War on embalming. Thank you very much.